And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
Today's guest is Brett Dobreskovic. In 2014, he had a near-death experience where he felt like he was connected to the divine, and today we're going to learn about it. Brett, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, so the audience loves to hear about near-death experiences, and if you don't mind, can we start on the day that yours happened?
It was February in 2014. It was actually in the evening, working on a mine site in Australia, and the mines where I work, it's this red dust and these big structures where they produce the iron ore. I'm working in one of the highest risk jobs in Australia. So after the special forces, we have the second highest death toll out of any profession, working with cranes and heavy lifting and everything like that. And so I'm performing my job at about 30 meters up on the top of this platform, and I miscalculate the lift with the crane. And what happens is, if it's out off center of gravity, this thing lifted up and it swung across this platform, and I literally grabbed onto this piece of structure that was swinging over the edge, and I see the ground 30 meters below me as I swing over the edge of this platform, and there's two tradesmen each side of this piece of structure, and they basically pull me back onto the platform, and there's this grim silence in the air for about, well, felt like an eternity, but it was a few seconds. And then someone just made a joke and said, "Oh, that was a close call." And it kind of sunk on me, started to sink into me. I was like, I could have been flattened and splattered on the pavement below, never to see my family again, never to say how much I love them. And this really activated something within me. And I started questioning, why I was here. What if I didn't do anything meaningful with my life? What if I, didn't serve any purpose? And so from there, I went back to my room, and these rooms are on the mine sites. They're little 1-by-1 rooms, and it was coming into the day, into the morning, because I'm on night shift. And I go back to my room and I go to sleep for about 3 hours. And this was my third night. This occurred on the third night of me working up on the mine site. So the significance of 3 is really important to remember, which you'll hear about later on in the story. And so I go to sleep for 3 hours, from about 8 to 11, and then I hear a bang, and it's the cleaners cleaning the room next door to me. And I just walk out and say, "Hey, I'm just trying to sleep. Can you just keep it down?" They're like, "Sure, no worries. We apologize." And I go lay down. I just can't sleep. And I'm tossing and turning in the bed. And it was about another 12 hours before I had to start my next shift. So as I'm tossing and turning, I'm like, all right, I'll just go watch a YouTube, or go keep my mind occupied, so I can eventually I'll fall asleep. I'll get tired. I'm not going to sit here and toss and turn. So there was about 4 hours before I had to wake up, and I laid in bed and I just started breathing, and I just started breathing really deeply. And I've never done meditation up until this point in my life. I was pretty much drunk a lot of alcohol throughout my younger years and up until this point. And I wasn't into like health, or I wasn't into wellness or anything like that. And I'm laying there, and literally it felt like 5 minutes had gone by, but it was 4 hours, and my alarm goes off, and I just have this presence about it within me. And I can feel, as I get up out of bed, I can feel like the clothes on my back. I feel my shoes, like everything I'm doing with just absolute presence with my breath. And there's no thoughts in my mind. It's like my mind is just clear. And I go to the kitchen of the this what they call the dry mess, where it's like everyone's like all you can eat buffet pretty much, and everyone has their own little tables. And I sit down to eat, and it's like my senses were enhanced. Like I could hear the air conditioner, the rustling of people collecting their forks and plates, the conversations that the chefs were having, the conversations behind me. And I could just, it's like all this extra information was coming in. And when I ate my food, it tasted stronger. It was like, and it wasn't overwhelming. I was just felt really, really present. And so I was up on this job for another 3 days, and I couldn't sleep. And I started to have this experience where I was like, what happens when we don't sleep? And so I end up flying back down to Perth, which is about a 3-hour plane ride back into the city. And as I'm on the plane, we hit a certain altitude as we're going up, and I get this euphoric feeling just kind of like pulse through my brain. And I was like, whoa, this is what's going on. Like all this stuff was just unfolding for me after this one event. And then as I get back down to Perth, I hadn't slept for about 4 or 5 days now. And like I start having these thoughts come up, and I start feeling like, oh no, I can't think about these certain thoughts, because these thoughts that were coming up were like, if I try to go to sleep, what happens if like I start sleepwalking and I do something that, you know, that's dangerous, right? And so my mind is just, after 4 nights of not sleeping, my mind starts just playing tricks on me, right? And I then end up at my girlfriend's house at the time, and I'm trying to get to sleep, and she's like, Brett, just go to sleep. And it's been about 5 or 6 nights. So I closed my eyes, and then it was like if you could see the whole kaleidoscope of your whole life, every single experience at once in a kaleidoscope. That's what I'd seen. And I went all the way back to the very first. It felt like if you could remember being born into the world and seeing light for the first time. It was literally, I seen this flash of light and this feeling of just like unconditional love and this joy. And I literally thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I was about to see God or Jesus or Buddha or something was about to show up. And I thought in that moment I died because I hadn't had any sleep for 6 days. And this was all occurring, like I wasn't into any drugs or anything, so none of this was drug induced. This was all because of that event. And I end up on the edge of the bed and my heart's racing out of my chest. And I'm like, whoa, what was that? Like, never was brought up in religious setting or anything like that. So to see that, I was like quite shook and, you know, at my core, I was like, that was amazing. I want to see what's on the other side of that. I want to go back there. So I closed my eyes again. And then it was like the complete opposite. And if anyone listening has seen The Lord of the Rings, there's a big flaming eye. And if you haven't, it's just a flaming circle with a flaming eye in the center. And it was like this, and the rest was just black. And it was like the void of emptiness. And it was like if I could go into your body and you had a pain and pleasure dial and turn them all the way up to the maximum, that's what I felt like, this excruciating numbness through me. And it felt like an eternity. And looking back now, it's like it almost seemed like the two forces and the two polarities of the creation of the universe, the void and the spark of life, the spark of creation. And so as I closed my eyes and went through that whole experience, it was like an eternity. Like I went back through time and space. It was like this place we've been to now, something told me we'd been here before. This has all occurred before. And this is just, there's a cycle to the universe. And as I came out of that experience, I was petrified. And so I started praying to God for the first time, and I was just like, please show me that you're real. Give me a sign. And the room was pitch black. And as I started, asking for guidance, the sun beamed through the blinds. It was like someone switched on the lights of Earth, and the birds were tweeting. And I walked to this window and open up the blinds, and there's a second story and the window backed out, and there was this big reserve. And I just seen all these trees. And do you know when if you've ever cried, you get like that ugly cry face, and you're kind of like,
yeah.
Well, my face was completely just plain, like just completely blank, and then just tears were just streaming down my cheeks. And I felt like I was the birds, I was the trees, I was one with everything, and everything was one with me. And I just felt so connected to everything in the universe. And it was quite profound, because as I came out of that, I was like, whoa, what is going on? And then what started to occur was I literally felt this call to go out into the bush. And so I ran out into the bush, and I got lost. I got stuck in this reserve. I couldn't find my way out. And then eventually I find the fencing on the outside. I get it on the outside, and I waved someone down. They picked me up and took me back to my great grandmother's, where I was staying at the time. And my family all rocked up, and there was this sense of like breakdown in the communication for me, because I didn't know how to explain what had gone on for me. I'm like, Brett, what's going on? What's happened? And I didn't know what to say. So I just said, I just said nothing. I could not explain in words the way I've explained things to you now. It's like, it's been over like 7 years now to really reflect on that. And I had no idea. And it was like the veil of reality had been lifted, and I could see like the symbols in, companies and organizations and corporations. And I could see like all these signs around me. It was just like this whole system we've been born into was completely fabricated. It's been completely fabricated. We're just born into it with no choice. And we just show up here as like, and we just start taking on all these beliefs, all these, subconscious conditioning as we grow up. And I just seen beyond it all. Like even I'd hear the songs on the radio, and I'd hear adverts and things, and I was like, something within me it didn't seem right. It didn't seem right, and it was just completely, it was completely shifting my worldview rapidly. And so the next thing I know, there's the ambulance rocks up, and there's these two paramedics. They said, Brett, do you want to come with us? And by this age, I was like just in a blank daze. I was just like, I didn't know what to do. And so I get into the ambulance, and they take me to the emergency. I'm in the emergency. My mum's with me at the time. And I look up at her, and it's like, I look towards her and I say, I can't be here. This isn't safe for me. And she says, okay. And so I walk out the front, and as I walk out the front, I'm standing and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And so then I had that thought. My mum comes back, and she's like, Brett, what are you doing? Where are you going? And she pulls me back in. And next thing I know, I get a bed in the emergency section of the hospital, and I'm laying there, and a nurse comes in. She's like, Brett, we're going to put you to sleep now. And I was like, what is this? Sounded really creepy at the time. And I started freaking out. I was like, what is she going to put me down? Like, like, is that what they say to the dog before they, and, or the pet, And I was like, my mind started, paranoia kicks in after not sleeping for a certain number of days. Because what I'd experienced was like, I was having thoughts, and then it was almost like the reality on the outside was showing me signs of my thoughts, almost giving me instant feedback. It was like that the analytical mind, which separates the conscious and the subconscious mind, had been kind of disrupted. So I was having conscious thoughts, and then it was showing like it was these different things were showing up in my reality, like my subconscious was either making it up and filling in the gaps, or that reality is fluid, but we have a conscious mind and an analytical mind that stops any of that kind of occurring. Because everything in life is just based on perception. Everything in our reality and our environment is based on perception. And so I obviously go under, they sedate me, and then I wake up and I'm like, I'm in a bit of a haze. I'm like, I don't know how long I was out, didn't know how long I was sleeping, and I had all these cords hanging out of me, and I just didn't feel safe. So I pulled out these cords and I got up out of the bed and I walked out from behind the curtain. There was a security guard standing outside behind the curtain, and he says, "Where do you think you're going?" I said, "Oh, I don't feel safe, I'm going home." And I started walking, and the next thing, it was like my worst nightmare was coming true. I had 5 male nurses on top of me, and I'm pleading with them, "Why are you doing this?" They're wrestling me, and I'm like trying to fight for my freedom, essentially. I'm like, I haven't hurt anyone, I haven't hurt myself, why are you doing this, why are you doing this? And they dragged me into this little white room and strapped me down to a bed. And the next thing, I wake up in the psychiatric ward. And I come to, and there's completely white walls, white blanket and sheets. And there was no padding like they show in the movies. It was actually just a very sterile room. And I get up out of the bed, and to my right side of the room, at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a door of the room. So I walk outside the door, and I look to my right, and there's a long hallway, and in front of me there's a floor to roof windows on the opposite side of the corridor, and I look out into the corridor, and there's this red brick and this barren courtyard with 3 meter high steel fencing. And so in that moment, my heart sunk. I thought, I've been thrown in the loony bin. I'm like, my life's over. I'm never going to be able to. No one's ever going to see me the same. And I just completely, my whole world just shook. And I turned around, and I was actually as soon as I turned around, I seen room number 33. And in that, there was some meaning in that for me, because the number 33. At the time, I didn't realize I'd been up on this job for 3 nights. I'd slept for three hours, and then it was 3 nights before I came back down to Perth. So all these things were happening in 3, and I've always looked at 3. 3 is we're the third planet from the sun. All these different elements that revolve. Like 3 is a sacred number, and so there was all these things coming up. And so basically what happened then was I had every single doctor in the whole hospital come and see me, and they'd be like, "Oh, Brett, you've got bipolar." And I would be like, "I don't believe your labels." And I'd be like, "Why do you think that?" They're like, "Oh, you have a brain imbalance." And I was like, "What's imbalance?" And they couldn't explain. And so they'd put me on medication, and I wouldn't like the medication, make me feel weird. So then the next time they'd change a doctor. And so, "Oh, Brett, you got schizophrenia," then it was bipolar, then it was manic depression, then it was psychosis, then it was multiple personality disorder. And every single time they came in, I would be like, "I don't believe in your fucking labels. You can't put me in a box." And thank God I did, because otherwise, if I believed one of those labels, I would have literally been on this medication. That would have become part of my identity. I'm X. I have X, or I've been diagnosed with X. And so it wasn't until a man who came in, and he said to me, he's the most experienced person in the whole place. He said, had 40 plus years from South Africa, all these extra credentials, which I didn't really like. Everyone was telling me that. He was like the specialist, and I didn't really care. Like, at the end of the day, I was not going to allow myself to be labeled by the pharmaceutical industrial complex. And he sat across from me, and he said, "Look, Brett, I've only ever seen this from one other other time in my whole career, but it's what's called a transient phenomenon. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I'll roll with that. I'll buy that label. And there was nothing literally. I've looked up online. It's not really. I think he's made it up because I can't find any sources on that term. And so from there, what had then happened was he told me that same experience I had on the plane of the euphoria, the other person was on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, was scuba diving when he felt that feeling and had this experience. And so it was a very eye-opening experience because we all kind of we would be in there and we would be awake to what was going on in the outside world. Everyone was kind of sleepwalking through life, and we were being drugged up so we could go back out into the zombie world, right? And we thought we were the sane ones and everyone else was crazy. And like a lot of people in there, they never harm anyone. They just were socially, I guess, not doing the standard behavior. And looking back now, it was all meant to be part of my journey, and it was all part of the divine order, you could say, for that to occur. Because after I'd got out, I was told I would be on medication for the rest of my life, if not 2 years. And I was having these medication, and I was asleep for 16 hours a day. And I was feeling like, whoa, this is not doing me any good. I'm falling into a bit of a dark hole. And so I started to wean myself back and started to go for runs and started to work out at the park and things like that, just to get my mind moving and my body moving. And then I came across an article where there was one piece of information that kind of just set me on a journey, where it was an article of a shaman walks through a psychiatric ward and he says, these are people with gifts. There's just no initiation in the modern world for someone going through a spiritual awakening. And I was kind of taken back, because I found meaning in what occurred for me. I was like, all right, there's something else to this. And so I started looking into Buddhism and meditation, and I started looking at different religions and theology. Then that led me to then want to understand the brain and neurology. And I started studying epigenetics and quantum physics. And so a year later, I met my first mentor, who introduced me to some of the listeners might know Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And then in 2016, I went on one of the world's largest cruise ships and sat with Dr. Joe Dispenza and had dinner with him and told him about my story and my journey. And he looked at me and he said, Brett, don't let your story define you, let it empower you. And so since then, I've just been on this journey to want to understand life, to want to understand universal laws and principles, and how I could heal what occurred for me and heal my, my mind, in a sense, to see things with a greater spectrum of awareness, because I knew that there was deep meaning to what occurred for me if I just took the time to look, if I took the time to see what was the lesson, what was the blessing in these events. And it completely was necessary to my personal evolution. And only a couple of months back, some of this stuff came up of when I would refuse the medication, and then they would come in and pin you down. And basically, this was my direct experience of medical tyranny, where I'd get jabbed with a needle in my ass. Several times in my 28 days that I was there, at night, they would come in and basically pin me down and jab me. And I went back to that experience, and I used to have a lot of resentment. And I realized that these people were just loving me with all their heart, doing what they thought was the right thing for me at that time. And it was probably something I did need. And if that didn't occur, I could have ran out into the bush, and I was getting called to nature, but I could have. Who knows what could have happened if I didn't get put through that experience. But it was an experience I was meant to have, because now when as a coach, as a person who actually guides people to discover their purpose, I now can hold anybody through anything that they've been through, because I've been through one of the most, in my perception, one of the most challenging events of my life. I've overcome that and been able to share from a place of vulnerability and authenticity, that no matter what any human being's been through, that if they take the time to see the hidden blessing and the divine order of how that actually was specifically designed for the evolution of their soul, then, then once that you have that realization, that's really, really so liberating. It's no longer a weight on your shoulders. It's no longer a burden, because for a while there, I had to bury that story and push it down. And I thought I could never tell a soul about what occurred for me. I'll never tell another human being that story, because it held a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. And now it's my personal story of transformation, because up until that point in my life, I didn't believe there was anything greater than what we can see with our physical eyes. And it led me, I dropped out in year 10, Jeff. So at 15 years old, I'd stopped going to school and hadn't picked up a book in 7 years. And now I can sit down, like I recently spoke to the psychiatrist after 7 years at the start of this year, and had a conversation with him about neurochemistry and neuroplasticity and all this stuff. And he was asking me for sources and information that I was giving it to him. This dude's been in his career for 45 years. And so I've been grateful enough to find the information it's cutting edge. It's cutting edge science. It's groundbreaking, it's shifting paradigms about what we know about reality, especially stuff in quantum physics, which is really fascinating. But that's the story in a nutshell, really. A long story short-ish.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So I want to take you back to the beginning. It sounded like you almost had an accident at work where you could have died, but you luckily didn't die. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And somehow that seemed like it spun you into like an existential crisis. You started thinking about what would life be without you, and you didn't do all that. And then it appears that it kind of morphed itself into some kind of spiritual awakening. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally.
Did you ever feel like you were outside of your body at any point in time?
Oh, many times, especially when when I was in the bush, in the nature reserve. Like, I would sit down when I was lost in there, and I would just take myself back to being in bed and thinking I was going to wake up from a bad dream. And then when I was on the medication, like, that stuff I would like find myself 2 hours after just staring at this blank wall, and I'd just gone and traveled the whole universe. Like, it was like some pretty full-on experiences, but nothing that really stands out in specific detail, because it was all a blur. Like, a lot of stuff happened in a very short period of time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's really is like, I went, there was points where I was in nature, and I just seen like the universe in a grain of sand. It was like my mind traveled into this grain of sand, and it was like the universe was in there, and I went back into the solar system and a planet, and just like all like a vivid movie in my mind though. And it was like, they call it I was hallucinating. And I would speak to, like, there was this particular psychiatrist who was doing his studying as a student, and he would come and sit in, and me and him had a few one-on-one chats, and he said, look, I've been doing some soul searching since I met you. And I said to him, so what occurs? Like, I said, I felt like I was having all these extra senses. My senses were heightened. He said, yeah, people who go through psychosis actually feel like their hearing increases, or their sight will increase. And so for me, I took that as like, well, what if that's actually happening within the brain, and we're perceiving a greater spectrum of reality? And what occurred was obviously because when you have a near-death experience, the pineal gland activates and you have DMT release. Mine was like an onset, delayed kind of response where it wasn't it didn't all happen in this one flash where I literally died. It was like I had this near-death experience where I almost seen myself falling to this concrete 30 meters below me. And then it kind of shook me afterwards. And I didn't really think much of it afterwards until I got woken up 3 hours into my sleep, which, if I didn't get woken up in that moment, I probably would have just had a regular sleep and, would have gone back to normal and my life would have just been down the road of following what my parents wanted me to do, which was to, get the good job, buy the white picket house, get the white picket fence and a house, get a pet, get a wife, have a happily ever after, getting a lot of debt and, slave away for the rest of my life, basically doing something that doesn't truly fulfill me and then make up for the unfulfillment with alcohol or gambling or, just entertainment and, probably be one of the people that, not that it's right or wrong, but someone who doesn't listen to podcasts and would just rather watch, TV. So yeah, it definitely opened up my whole worldview and took my whole, changed the whole trajectory of my entire life, basically, Jeff, where, I looked at some of the notes that after I'd been out for a couple of years and I was saying to him, I'm here to create a new universe and I'm a prophet. And I had this, Russell Brand talks about it in one of his stand-ups. It's called the Messiah complex. And so because of this internal shift that I had taken place and seeing this, how fluid reality is, there was a part of me that was started to see whoa, where we create this. And now if you look into some of the quantum physics, the observer effect is a perfect example. Is we observe matter into existence and our senses can only, for instance, our sight can only see 1% of the visible known light spectrum. So out of the known light spectrum, we can only see 1% of the other 99%. And that's from gamma rays to ultraviolet. Mm-hmm. And then outside of that, there's probably light that we haven't even observed or studied yet. But outside that spectrum of light. So we are only seeing a slither of reality. And we are based upon, the way we've been, I guess, taught through our education system, through lineage. We're taught that we're powerless, that, life is just a random events of, genetic mutations over time. And this is the paradigm of the Darwin theory, that we just randomly popped up out of nowhere because of random genetic mutations. And here we are now, and life's meaningless and purposeless, and it's survival of the fittest. And then that's what, that's the paradigm of our society. Oh, everyone's going out and it's essential, but everyone's going out and, it's neighbor against neighbor. It's, I'm going to outdo them and I'm going to have a nicer car or a nicer house or nicer stuff or this or that. And so there's this part of us that's been lost connection with our divinity as a species. And we put it in, some people will put it in religion, or some people will put it in, in the dollar. Some people will put their, they'll worship brands and icons and idols and superstars. And really, we've forgotten that the energy that flows through our frontal cortex, right, the prefrontal lobe of our brain, which is the crowning achievement of human evolution, the same energy that's passing through that is the same energy that's creating supernovas in the atmosphere. Like through the quantum field, everything is entangled. And when you see direct experiences of that, like it's profound, because you see how the center of the universe is actually within the human mind. So we've created everything, Jeff.
That's a fascinating way to look at that. I'm a fan of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and I really like his meditations. What part of his program did you find was most helpful for you?
I love his meditations, and I've done them since 2016, and tried different ones. I found more so the information was really, really potent, like understanding the brain and neurology, and for me, it just pieced some holes together. Because I've studied some of Bruce Lipton's work, some of Dr. John DeMartini's work, and these different principles around our mind and quantum physics. And so what I found really most empowering about Joe's is probably more so the information around how we actually create this reality. And one meditation I did a couple of months ago was did the thank life for an unpredictable sign to let you know that you're on the right track, that he does in some of the end of his meditations. So I felt called to go down the beach, and I did some breath work. As I was doing some breath work, a bird actually landed on top of my head.
Wow.
I was like, what? And then it flew off, and then I was doing my breath work, and then it crawled up my arm, landed back on top of my head, and there's people walking past at the beach, taking photos and laughing. And, it's little things like that, I guess, when you start to see the effects that your mind has in reality, creating my 6-week course, Discover Your Purpose, before any of this, before that happened, I was literally about 12 months ago, me and one of my best friends that I'd met along my journey, we actually moved into a retreat center. It's a 20-bedroom retreat center on 52 acres in the Perth Hills. And we begun setting it up. It'd been vacant for about 3 years, and we pretty much manifested this thing, no capital down, literally no risk. And we got given the keys to this place, and we started setting it up. And then 12 months after, we had our first event in January of this year. And then a week later, on the 1st of February, it was a Monday, the bushfires came through and burnt half the building down. So it was unlivable. So we had to evacuate, and that was a complete shift in terms of my focus and energy. And it was all right, well, how can I do something that serves and makes a difference in people's lives? And because we had this whole plan and set up for this retreat center to help people bring community together and help people focus on their health, focus on their wellness, focus on their vision. And so that's when I decided to create an online aspect. And I never thought I would be able to do it. There was that point of me where I was like, oh, can I do this? I've never been able to do anything like this. And so I just had to trust and surrender. And I literally that was the experience of being able to take control of your own emotions, and stay in that point of, I guess, stay with an open heart, that if I just keep following this path that is being called upon me, things will unfold as they're meant to. And now I've got clients from 7 different countries all over the world.
So what is your purpose?
So my purpose is express the love of my heart and serve humanity. That's a short version, but I've also got a 25-word statement, which is the divine love within me is a unique expression of creation that I wholeheartedly share as a gift to the world. So that's my purpose summed up, but I literally have a 3-page document with each area of my life, how I want that to look, and I read that and refine that. I've been refining that over probably the last 6 years after I met my first mentor.
Is there anything about this experience that you had that inspires you?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is we all have our darkest moment in our life, right? And that's what makes us human. If you look into some of Joseph Campbell's work, who was a mythologist, he spoke about the hero's journey. And we all have this dark, this moment of, he calls it the belly of the whale or the pit moment of our life. And I feel like as individual expressions of creation, we show up here and we go through this life and we choose what is going to take our soul in the greatest trajectory of evolution. And these darkest moments that we are here to overcome them and shine the light for others who are walking through the dark. And so my message is that no matter what you've been through, no matter what's occurred, that all life is transient. We're here for a flash of an eye. In a million years, everything we know, love, have built will be dust. And so life is transient, but also it's a phenomenon. We're all phenomenal. The fact that we showed up in this physical form with the experiences that we've been through, like we get so caught up in the drama of our daily lives, we forget that like the atoms that me and you were made out of, right? Because in the law of thermodynamics, the second law of thermodynamics, it talks about the law of conservation. And the law of conservation states that energy can be neither created nor destroyed, it only can transform. And so the atoms that we are made up of, the particles that we are made up of, are literally as old as time. It was the same energy that was exploded into existence from the Big Bang, is the same amount of energy that exists today. It's just taken a unique form and a unique structure. And I'd realized along this stuff, like the fabric of reality is unconditional love. That's what gives order and organization to matter. So my message is like, no matter what you've been through, there's always love in the event. And love, and not love like human love, like I only love you if you don't sleep with anyone else, or if you don't do this or you don't do that. That's conditional, right? Unconditional love is like seeing the love in where you swore it never existed. And I would define it as the unity of polarity, because everything in our life, we perceive things as dark and light, pleasure and pain, right and wrong, good and bad, happy and sad. And the unity of those two polarities is what I would define as unconditional love. And so we're here as immortal souls to learn to love it all. And because at a higher level, like we already know this, we've already experienced this, like all consciousness, right? Consciousness, in my view, is like created itself to experience itself in all forms. So we all come from the same source. It's like a seed was planted, and you could say that was the Big Bang, right? And then a tree grew, and then we're all leaves on that individual tree, but we all come from that same seed. And then, trees will fall off and die, and new trees will come in that place. And this is kind of like, and then it's like, it makes you wonder, like, well, if we're here living this life and we can self-reflect as consciousness on ourselves, like there's deep meaning in all of that, but we've been told it's just random series of events and life is meaningless, just survival of the fittest. And it doesn't truly serve us as individuals, because we're starting to realize now, like, we are all part of this collective creation of reality. Mm-hmm. We're co-creators, and yeah, then we go into like Carl Jung's theories, where he talked about the collective unconsciousness, and like if we all believe in a certain paradigm, that will then create the limitations of us as and potential as beings, and then that's all reflected back into our neurology, and then that's how we project our reality out into the universe. Because ultimately, it's not reality coming in through our senses; it's our brain is structured and hardwired in a certain way to perceive reality, and we project that lens onto the world.
Who would you have been if you would have never had this potential accident?
That's a great question. I would probably be just sleepwalking through my life, if I'm honest. Just miserable inside, angry, cold, just bitter, bitter at the hand that life had dealt me. Because, I had a pretty rough upbringing. We all have our story, I was dysfunctional family, and I made it mean that, I came from a broken home, so I was broken, and I carried this story on my shoulder, dragged it around with me throughout life, and it would affect my relationships and my social life and my work life and all this kind of stuff. And I never really stopped to look and reflect. So if that didn't occur, I would probably be, just not even half the person I am today. I would be completely numbing myself to my potential as a human being and as an infinite soul walking this planet. Like, it's a good question, man. It's hard to really say, but I feel like now there was a part of me always growing up that was a deep thinker, that was a little bit philosophical. Like, philosophy was always really interesting to me. And I ignored that. I ignored that I had to do what everyone else wanted me to do and live up to everyone else's expectations. So I kind of was lucky, because I probably would have had a midlife crisis, at 40 years old, but it feels like, I've had like 3 before I'm 30, like, and it's just evolved. It helped me evolve, it helped me feel a sense of knowing within myself that we are here as consciousness experience itself, and to experience all of it, the pleasure and the pain, the right and the wrong, the good and the bad, and to open our hearts, and to continue to open our hearts, and continue to open our hearts. Because there was a quote I heard recently, it was like, there's so many people who are living but not alive because they live with a closed heart.
You're obviously a completely different person than you were back then. How have your friends and family reacted to the new you?
It's another good question. Well, to say first off, I was very isolated. My family, my family actually was pulled together, was a very strong unit, and supported me the best way that they knew. They were present. They didn't know what to say, they didn't know what to do, but they just showed up. After I got out, everyone went back to normal lives, and I was stuck in my thoughts in my room. Literally, I wasn't working at the time, just trying to piece together the puzzle. And then I was fortunate enough to meet someone who opened me up to, I remember it was probably a year later, I went to, I have to share a bit of a story with you. So my mum, a year later after this event, got breast cancer, or was diagnosed breast cancer. And so she was going through her kind of healing journey and her, dark night of the soul, you could say. And my babysitter, who my mum's still friend with when I was 4, she was 14. She said to my mum, "You need to go and see my cousin. He makes superfoods." So my mum and my sister went around there and got some superfood powder, and they said, "Brett, we've found someone who's just like into all the stuff," because I'd been on this journey of like studying meditations and, organic eating and yoga. And he's like, "We found someone who's into the same stuff as you. You need to meet him." And so I went over to his house, and he had like a bit of a sharing circle, and everyone started sharing their story. It was coming to me, and I was like, "Holy shit, I've never told a soul this. And I'm here with a room full of strangers that don't know me. I'm about to share this story." And so I told them, and as I looked up, they all had their jaws dropped, and they were like, what happened next? And they're like, "Wow, you had a spiritual awakening." And they're like, "Go and look up all these different people." I think it was like Deepak Chopra and Don Tolman and Alan Watts and read the Celestial Prophecy, The Alchemist, like all these different. I was like, okay, and I was taking all these notes down, and so my whole kind of social circle expanded, and so I still have friends that I was friends with before, but we're obviously on different paths now, and I continue to expand my social circle and my sphere of people who I connect with, and my family now. Yeah, they really. I'm their, like, I feel like their trusted advisor in life and in their health, and so they come to me when they're struggling. An ex-partner actually said to me, she's like, "Brett, you're the shaman of the family, and you're like, you went through the initiation, you know? And I feel like that occurs for a lot of people, where we have this spiritual awakening in whatever way, shape or form. It might not be as intense as, for instance, my story, but like you have this realization and you start to realize there's more to what you've been told. There's more mystery outside your history. There's more, you know, there's more answers to your questions. There's more, I guess, realizations that you haven't had. And so for me, like, I feel like anyone who goes through that, an awakening, they go through that point where they feel a little bit alone and a little bit lost, and like everyone's, you know, not awake around them, and they feel kind of trapped, or they feel isolated in one way, shape, or form. And right now, what's going on the planet, like, people are waking up rapidly to what is really going on in the world, and I feel really blessed and honored to be able to go through that experience back then, because it allowed me to be prepared for what's coming, you know, and what's been going on. Because whilst we don't know what's going to happen in the future, like, there's also, you know, one thing I want to share with the audience as well is, like, I had a deep meditation and realization that, because my niece was born last year at the start of the pandemic. And so she was born, and I started to feel fear of, like, what kind of world is she going to grow up in if this is where we're headed, you know, if this is what was unfolding. And then I just got this realization of, like, that she's here to experience whatever her soul was meant to experience. And nothing outside in this physical realm, in this physical existence, nothing can harm an immortal soul. And that just gave me so much, like, a sense of safety and a sense of security. It's like nothing outside can harm, outside in this physical reality, can harm an immortal soul. And so that was a real blessing to receive that insight.
I'm going to switch gears on you because we're kind of starting to run out of time, but you do have an online course. What is your website for that?
So my website is discoveryourpurpose.com.au.
Okay.
All spelled the normal way. And so that's just an application to have basically a chat to see where you're at. You know, it's a free consultation to see where an individual's at. What do they need? What do they feel like if they're feeling lost or confused and lacking direction in their life, to really get clarity on why they're here and where they're going. Because in that 7 years, Jeff, after that near-death experience and to where I'm now, I was literally studying the science of purpose. Like, I was looking for my purpose. I was wondering why this thing occurred for me and what happened and what it meant. And as I was going throughout it, like, the bushfires hit, and I had a handful of notepads that I evacuated with, and I opened up these pages, and it was all related to purpose. And I was like, whoa. And that was when I had that realization, that was where Discover Your Purpose was birthed. Because I'd realized for the last 7 years, I'd been researching this stuff, and it was all linked. And so our behavior, our internal compass, whether we're aware of it or not, is actually trying to give us feedback, right, from the environment to take us back on track. Now, if we're not clear of it, we'll try to live out someone else's expectations and someone else's, like what I was doing. I was walking the path that my parents wanted me to walk. And then life kind of just, you know, bitch slapped me and took me completely into this whole other realm. And it's led me down to this. And every single event and every single sequence was specifically designed to take me to this point. And when you see that, you know with absolute certainty and clarity that, hey, this is where I'm meant to be. And so when someone comes to me, like, I want to have that realization to know that they're on the right track, that they're, you know, the most important thing a human being could ever do in their whole entire life is get clear on their purpose, why they're here. If you look at any influential person, anyone who's made a difference in the world, left a mark, made an impact, they all have one thing in common. Do you know what that is, Jeff?
Knowing their purpose.
That's it.
Is there a simple way for someone to identify that they know their purpose?
That's a really good question.
Like, as if you're successful in life, does that mean you know your purpose? Does it have to be not only being successful, but as well as happy and loving what you do as well?
Well, that's exactly right, because there's so many people who are successful that they're not on that. No, there's the people out there who are miserable and they're making millions of dollars a year. And they just think, oh, when I get the next target, the next thing outside. So what it is really, whatever's truly most inspiring and fulfilling and meaningful to us is our purpose. So our life, like if you sat down and you had an hour to do anything and no one needed to remind you, no one needed to tell you what you should do, what would you spontaneously be inspired to act upon? Now, most people would probably scroll through Instagram and Facebook, but again, their feed is tailored to their own inner psyche, their inner consciousness. And so the information that they resonate with most is actually aligned with their purpose. But we get so clouded with all these different opinions and expectations and ideas, and then we're trying to add more information when really we need to clear that information so we get a clear connection to our heart. And our heart has always been guiding us, and life's been showing us signs the whole time. So to answer your question, to know when you're on purpose is when you get to that point where you do something you love that literally can bring a tear of gratitude to your eye, where it's like your heart opens up and you're like, this is exactly why I'm here. And you have clarity. There's no doubt. And you're willing to dedicate your energy and your energies and dedicate your life to fulfill that thing. It's not like, oh, I'm going to do this thing over here and then take 2 days off or then I do this and then I go on vacation. It's something you will be intrinsically inspired to do that no one would ever need to remind you. And that's different for every human being. But then we get caught in that we have to work, and then leisure is different. But what we love to do and what actually serves a need in the world, right? The thing that we value most, we can fill a void with, right? For another human being. And same with this person, whatever they value, they can fill it. What they value fills the void for someone else. And that's kind of how I see the world, is like we're all this interconnected ecosystem where we are inspiring each other to evolve.
So you want to do something that you love to do, but it's also something that fulfills a need for somebody else.
Yeah.
If a guy just loves going fishing all day because he just loves fishing, that's kind of not really a purpose, because there's not really helping anybody unless there's too many fish on the planet. Right?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, like if that's his value, yeah, he can do that. But like the question is, then we get most fulfilled from when we're serving as well. There's two different parts of the brain. There's a motoring aspect, and there's a sensory aspect of the brain. Sensory is where we receive reward and pleasure. And the motoring output is where it's involved with action and our intentions. And so if we're just sitting there and we're just doing it for ourselves, at some point it will become unfulfilling. But then when we merge, like say the fisherman, he goes, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy a boat, and every weekend I get 10 people on this boat and we go to this not luxury, but like we go to this exclusive island where there's specific fish and we go diving, and he gets to do what he loves, and he serves a purpose then, you know what I mean? Then it's the meshing of those two things is what is going to fulfill us most. And the thing is as well, I want to be really clear, is that the path we are destined to walk hasn't been walked by anyone before. It's something that's unique and specific to us. It'll be, for me, like I write music and I put out my music as well. What I teach and what I share with people is like information that's specific to my own journey that I've created and meshed all these different pieces together. And so what we're here to do we're here to basically forge our own path and inspire other people to do what lights them up. And when we do that, that's when we activate the prefrontal cortex, where we have executive function, we have self-governance, we have our inner genius and creativity, We're most influential in our ability to communicate. We have more of a longer term vision than a short term satisfaction. Want to just numb out and eat the sugar, gamble, do whatever to escape. Want to make up for the unfulfillment in our lives. So when we're doing what truly lights us up, we are most empowered as well. And so I feel like what's going on in the world at a mass scale is like it's actually part of our evolution for us to go. We're giving our power away to external forces to govern our lives, and now people are waking up and going, no. I want to lead from within. I don't want to be led from someone else, because we've been constantly outsourcing our own sense of leadership, our own sense of, we outsource our thinking to Google, to YouTube, to Facebook, and we let our consciousness be hijacked, and we lose connection to our heart. And our heart actually has a plexus of neurons, and wherever there's neurons in the body is the most intelligence. And so when we're connected to that, there's actually wisdom. And that's why all the ancient cultures, all of them they talk about the heart. And now we know that the heart actually sends 8 times more signals to the brain than the brain sends signals to the heart. So the heart is constantly giving information up to the brain, but we're so caught in our heads trying to figure it out and analyze everything, we lose connection. And the brain has 2 hemispheres. It's in duality. It's like, it has these 2, do this, or what about that, or what about, fear? That's where fear is. But in our heart, it's one. It's one clear voice. It's an inner knowing. And if you start to, when you meditate, I honestly, I have questions. I ask myself questions, and I ask my heart questions all the time, and I get clear feedback. I get clear response. And that, when we start to master, I guess, when we start to get clear on the voice within us, that inner voice, that intuition, right? Then the voices on the outside and the opinions on the outside start to, I guess, fade out, and the voice on the inside becomes loudest. And that's what's going to lead us and govern us most effectively.
It's interesting that you mentioned the heart, because this morning I did one of Joe Dispenza's meditations on bringing more abundance to your life and opportunities. And I think, I'm trying to put it the way he was saying it, but basically you want to bring all that energy through the heart and feel through the heart. And I was wondering about that. I was like, well, why did he choose the heart from bringing in abundance and energy and opportunity? Was it a chakra thing or what?
Well, the heart is the center of the higher worlds, which is your higher chakras, and the lower world, which is your lower chakras. It's the middle. It's the balancing point, right? Mm. And so when we're in our heart, like to the soul, that's where our soul, right? You could say our soul is connected to our heart. The soul is like the state of unconditional love. So when we're in our heart, like nothing's missing. We're not in scarcity. We're not afraid. We're not, if you just, if someone listening, if you just put your hand on your heart and you just pause for a few moments, like you're not worried about what's going on out here. You're internal, and you feel safe. You feel connected. You feel present. You feel grounded when you're connected to your heart. And so, in another way of saying it is like, to the senses, something is always missing, but to the soul and to the heart, nothing's missing. And so as soon as we recognize nothing's missing, we're then able to create from a point of, I guess, freedom and liberation, and there's no limitations when we create from that space. And we start to resonate. So if someone comes to you and they're being all analytical and logical, you're probably not going to connect with them as much, and they're probably not going to be as influential if someone's sharing something from their heart. Yeah. And sharing from their heart as well. That's where we really feel connected, and what's missing in the world is that deeper connection to our heart as well, and to the heart at a greater level, because we're all so just governed by the inner workings of our mind. And one of the things I talk about in Discover Your Purpose is that even when it comes to our wealth, like the more clear we are on our purpose, the more intentional we are with our actions, the more creative we obviously are, the more influential we are. So our wealth lies in what we perceive our purpose to be. If you look at like, say, like Elon Musk or anyone that's making a huge influence and impact in the world, they have a clear purpose and they attract wealth into their life because they have a long-term vision, because a long-term vision pays you and short-term satisfaction costs you. And so this is, we've all been trained to have like blinkers on week to week, month to month. You know, the greater the greater our vision in terms of space and time that it takes up, the more driven internally we feel to fulfill that. And especially if it's connected to our heart. Like if it's not connected to our heart, we'll give up eventually. We're like, oh, it's too hard. That's not for me. That's not my thing. But if it's connected to your heart and you can see how all the things in your life, all the childhood trauma, all the drama that you went through, all the challenges you went through was actually specifically designed to evolve you to fulfill your purpose. When you see that, like it can't be unseen. And so it's almost like life was training you. Like there's specific like moments in my life or series of moments in my life where like a relationship that was a year and a half, and there's one conversation that was like, oh, that was what I was meant to get from it. That was the one thing that, and it's like our mind will remember that as well. So when we activate our purpose, what the ancient Greeks called our telos, they created a whole study on it called teleology, which is the study of meaning and purpose. Over 3,000 years ago, they wrote about this because they knew how important it was. And Napoleon Hill calls it the chief aim. There's different names for it. So the telos, there's a part of the brain called the telencephalon, which is the forebrain. And when that lights up, we have the most retention of information. We have the most attention and we have the most intention. So meaning we have whatever we remember the most clearly in our mind, those memories, if we have a negative association to it, we need to really balance those out and see the hidden blessing, because that's life giving us a sign and an indication that that there's meaning and purpose in that we haven't actually seen. But also if there's things that you remember that inspire you, that's connected to your purpose. Whenever we feel concentrated and most focused and most attention, like if I started talking to you about makeup or car engines and you weren't into car engines or makeup, like you'd go over your head and you'd be like, you'd just glaze over, right? If someone said that to me, I know I would, depending on what lights you up, right? If your name was Jenny and you loved makeup, maybe you'd be like, oh yeah, great, I love this. But the point is we have most attention and most focus and concentration on whatever aligns to our purpose. And then we have the most intention. So meaning whatever we spontaneously feel inspired to act upon, right, is part of our purpose as well. So one of the things that's really, really important to understand is looking at also our voids, what we perceive as most missing. So whatever we will perceive as most missing growing up, for me, there was a lack of understanding. And so now I have a high value on understanding, which is learning and communication and expanding my mind. For instance, like most doctors, nurses, carers, healers perceived there was a lack of care in their life, so they have a high value on care. Most judges, police, lawyers perceived there was a great injustice done by them, so they have a high value on maintaining justice. So all these govern our psychology at a deep unconscious level. And this is what is actually responsible for every single action and decision and choice we've ever made in our life.
Wow. All right, I'm running out of time, Brett, so I'm going to have to get one more question out of you, or maybe a statement. But before we finish up here, do you have one last positive message that you can share with everyone?
What I would love to share is that no matter what you're going through, what you've been through, or what you're going to go through, that you are loved. No matter what you've done or what you haven't done, you are worthy of love.
That's a great message. Brett, thank you so much for being my guest today. I really appreciate you. I wish you massive success in whatever you're doing, And since you're on the other side of the planet, the day's kind of just begun for you over there. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And it was an absolute privilege and honor to be able to connect with you in this way.
Thank you, Brett.
Thanks for the podcast.
All right. Take care.
See you, Jeff.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.